A powerful Nigerian billionaire is at a loss when his son continues to fail in school. His fortune can't solve this problem, but a dedicated teacher who sees the boy's hidden potential provides the key, unlocking not only the child's brilliance but also an unexpected and profound love that will redefine their lives forever. Hello, bestie. Please stay with me as I unfold this interesting romantic story. If you enjoy the story, please support us by subscribing to this channel and hit the notification button for more. Thank you. Grab your popcorn, sit back, relax, and enjoy this story. Chief Adebayo Adeyemi's office was a monument to success. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a godlike view of the Lagos skyline, a testament to the empire he'd built from grit and granite. But today, the empire felt hollow. In his hand was a report card, a brutal landscape of crimson DS and ES. His 10-year-old son, Kola, sat opposite him, small and drowning in a plush leather chair, his eyes fixed on his shoes. Kola, what is this? Bayo's voice was low, a controlled rumble that hid a well of frustration and fear. Another tutor resigned. He said, "You are willfully inattentive." Kola mumbled something inaudible, a single tear tracing a path down his cheek. The sight shattered Bayo's stern facade. He wasn't just a disappointed father, he was a failure. His wealth could buy anything except his son's academic success, his happiness. He dismissed Kola with a weary sigh, promising a new, stricter tutor. The boy shuffled out, the silence he left behind heavier than any boardroom tension. Desperation, a feeling Bayo loathed, forced his hand. He scheduled a meeting with Kola's new form teacher, a Miss Nneka Obi. He anticipated another sycophant, ready to blame Kola while praising the great Chief Adeyemi. Chief Adebayo Adeyemi's office was a sanctum of power and precision. The air hummed with silent, expensive climate control, carrying the subtle scent of polished teak and old leather. Sunlight, filtered by the tinted floor-to-ceiling windows, cast a muted, golden glow over the Lagos skyline, a kingdom he had helped build. He sat behind a vast, minimalist desk, a single sheet of paper before him, Kola's report card, a stark field of failure in crimson ink. He had braced himself for another sycophant. He expected a nervous, fluttering individual who would offer hollow apologies, make grand, unkeepable promises, and inevitably end the meeting with a fawning request for a donation to the school library. It was a dance he knew well, and he was already bored of the steps. The knock on his door was firm, confident. Not the timid tap he'd anticipated. Enter. The woman who stepped into his office was a shock to his system, a splash of vibrant color and calm in his monochrome world of power. She was not beautiful in the polished, artificial way of the socialites who frequented his charity galas. Hers was a different kind of beauty, grounded, intelligent, and utterly compelling. She wore a well-tailored Ankara dress in a deep indigo blue, patterned with gold geometric shapes that seemed to catch the light. It was professional yet undeniably feminine, hugging a figure that was both strong and softly curved. She carried a simple leather portfolio, not a stack of disorganized files. But it was her eyes that arrested him. Large, dark, and framed by lashes that needed no enhancement, they held a direct, unnerving calm. They scanned the room not with awe, but with a quiet, analytical assessment, before settling on him with an unnerving steadiness. "Chief Adeyemi," she said, her voice a warm, melodic alto that seemed to somehow lower the temperature of his own simmering frustration. "Thank you for making the time. I am Nneka Obi." She didn't wait for him to offer a seat. She took the chair opposite his desk, back straight, her posture radiating a quiet dignity that was entirely her own. No pretense, no posturing. Bayo, momentarily thrown off his script, gestured vaguely to the damning report card between them. "The reason for this meeting is, unfortunately, all too clear, Miss Obi." He leaned forward, lacing his fingers together, adopting his best boardroom intimidation pose. "My son is failing, spectacularly." Instead of flinching or offering placating noises, Nneka Obi's lips curved into a small, knowing smile. It wasn't condescending. It was the smile of someone who possessed a secret she was eager to share. "Chief Adeyemi, she began, her tone even and patient, as if she were explaining a fundamental truth to a bright but misguided student. I found that grades are often just a snapshot, a single, blurry photo of a complex and moving picture. They rarely tell the whole story. And in Cola's case, the snapshot is a complete lie. Bayo's eyebrows shot up. A lie? He had never heard a teacher speak this way. He was prepared for excuses, not a contradiction. His report card suggests a lack of intelligence or effort. She continued, her gaze never leaving his. The truth is, Cola possesses one of the most creatively intelligent, curious minds I have had the privilege to encounter. He just doesn't learn the way the standard curriculum teaches. Now he was fully intrigued. He leaned back in his chair, the leather creaking softly. Creative intelligence doesn't solve algebraic equations, Miss Obi. It can, she countered smoothly, her confidence a tangible force in the room. It simply needs the right key to unlock it. She opened her portfolio. Bayo expected to see more test papers, more graphs of failure. Instead, she carefully laid out a series of sketches on his immaculate desk. They were Cola's drawings, but they weren't the doodles of a distracted child. They were intricate, detailed, and breathtakingly imaginative. There were robots with elaborate hydraulic systems labeled in his messy scrawl, superheroes with detailed schematics of their powers, fantastical vehicles that defied physics. He draws these when he's supposed to be copying notes from the board, Neka explained, her voice softening with what sounded like genuine admiration. He's not being inattentive. He's bored. His mind is a Ferrari being forced to drive on a dirt road at 10 miles an hour. It needs a highway. It needs narrative, application, a purpose. He needs to know why. Her finger gently tapped one specific drawing. It was a complex, multi-stage water filtration system, complete with pumps and filters. We had a lesson 2 weeks ago on water scarcity in the northern regions. This is what he was doing while the other children were answering comprehension questions. He was designing a solution. He's an engineer, a problem solver, chief. He's struggling because he's being asked to memorize the parts of an engine when all he wants to do is take it apart, understand it, and make it better. Bayo stared at the drawing, then at the woman before him. He felt a seismic shift within himself. The frustration and disappointment that had been a constant knot in his stomach for months began to unravel, replaced by a dawning, awestruck understanding. This woman had seen his son, truly seen him. In a few short weeks, she had deciphered the code of his child's mind that he, the father, had been too busy or too blind to read. He looked from the brilliant, misunderstood sketches to Neka's face. Her expression was open, earnest, and filled with a passionate conviction that was more captivating than any physical beauty. In that moment, Chief Adebayo Adeyemi felt two powerful, simultaneous realizations slam into him. A profound, soul-deep gratitude for what she had given him, a vision of his true son, and a startling electric jolt of pure attraction for the woman who had made it possible. She wasn't just a teacher, she was a revelation. The morning after his meeting with Neka Obi, Chief Adebayo Adeyemi awoke not with his usual sense of impending corporate battles, but with a strange, unfamiliar feeling, cautious optimism. The image of Cola's intricate drawings was seared into his mind, a testament to a reality he had been blind to. And at the center of that new reality was her, the woman with the calm eyes and the voice that seemed to quiet the noise in his head. His morning coffee tasted the same, the view from his penthouse was unchanged. But something fundamental had shifted. He found himself checking his email not for merger updates, but for something else entirely. And right on time, at 7:15 a.m., it arrived. The subject line was simple, Cola's progress. His heart did a small, ridiculous skip. He opened it. Chief Adeyemi, it was a pleasure meeting with you yesterday. As discussed, Cola's mind thrives on practical application. In our math class today, we are introducing fractions. Rather than abstract problems, perhaps you could engage him this evening by asking for his help calculating the fuel-to-distance ratio for a potential trip to the family house in Abeokuta. Frame it as a mission-critical calculation. His expertise is needed. Best, Neka Obi. Bayo read the email twice. a mission-critical calculation. He almost smiled. This was a language he understood, a strategy he could execute. That evening, he didn't summon Kola to his office for a lecture. Instead, he found his son in his room, sketching another complex machine. "Kola," Bayo said, leaning against the doorframe. "I need your help with something." Kola looked up, his eyes instantly wary, expecting another admonishment. "In planning a trip to Abeokuta this weekend in the Range Rover," Bayo continued, keeping his tone casual. "I need to know exactly how much fuel we'll need. The tank capacity is 90 liters, and the distance is about 100 kilometers. I'm terrible with fractions. Think you can work out the ratio for me? It's quite important." Kola's wariness melted into confusion, then into dawning interest. His father was asking for his help? On something important? He put down his pencil. "The fuel consumption is 10 kilometers per liter, Dad. So, 100 kilometers divided by 10. That's 10 liters." He said it quietly, as if waiting to be corrected. Bayo nodded seriously, as if receiving a vital report from a top engineer. "Excellent. Precise. Thank you, Kola. You've been a great help." The look of stunned pride on his son's face was worth more than any closed deal. The emails from NECA became their secret rhythm, their shared project. They were never long, but each was a masterclass in insight and pedagogy. "Chief, we discussed the Benin Kingdom in history today. Kola was particularly fascinated by the bronze castings. I mentioned your extensive collection of African art. Perhaps you could show him your favorite piece and tell him the story behind it? A first-hand account is always more powerful than a textbook." That night, Bayo led Kola to a locked glass case containing a magnificent bronze leopard from the old Benin Kingdom. He didn't just name it, he spoke of the lost wax process, the symbolism of the leopard in Edo culture, and the history of how he acquired it. Kola listened, rapt, asking questions Bayo was delighted to answer. Another email read, "Kola expressed an interest in robotics after a science documentary. The concept of kinetic energy is on our syllabus next week. I recall a tech startup in your portfolio specializes in automated machinery. A virtual tour, perhaps? Connecting the concept to a real-world application you champion would be invaluable." Bayo arranged a video call with the lead engineer of the company. Kola, wide-eyed, spent an hour asking about motors, sensors, and energy conversion. The transformation was not a slow climb. It was a metamorphosis. The sullen, withdrawn boy began to vanish. In his place emerged a curious, engaged child who started to initiate conversations. "Dad, did you know that the algorithm for your car's GPS uses a form of calculus? Or the design of the suspension bridge we crossed is a practical application of Newton's laws?" The dinners that were once silent ordeals became lively exchanges. Bayo found himself sharing stories of his own struggles in school, of his first failed business venture, making himself vulnerable in a way he never had. Kola, in turn, began to share his own ideas, wild, inventive plans for solar-powered cars and AI-assisted farming. Bayo's fascination with NECA grew with each passing day. Her emails were a window into a mind that was both fiercely intelligent and deeply compassionate. She wasn't just teaching Kola. She was teaching him. She was showing him how to be a father. Each note was a thread, and she was weaving a bridge strong enough to connect a father and his son across a chasm of misunderstanding. He found himself reading her emails multiple times, analyzing her word choice, the elegant simplicity of her suggestions. He began to anticipate them, his morning routine now structured around that 7:15 a.m. alert. It was more than gratitude he felt. It was a burgeoning, profound respect that was quickly, undeniably, turning into an obsession. He was captivated by the mind of a woman who believed so powerfully in potential, and he couldn't shake the feeling that he desperately wanted her to see the potential in him, too. Not as Chief Adeyemi, the billionaire, but as Bayo, the man. The progress reports had become a highlight of Bayo's month, a ritual he guarded jealously in his calendar. What was once a duty had transformed into a keenly anticipated event. Today's meeting, however, was different. It was no longer just about Kola's academic turnaround. It was a performance, and he was the nervous lead actor. He had instructed his house manager, Mrs. Adebayo, to prepare a special dinner. Something impressive but not intimidating. Homely yet exquisite. The poor woman had given him a look that blended confusion with deep amusement before heading to the kitchens to perform minor miracles. Bayo stood in his walk-in closet, critically assessing his reflection. He dismissed the formal agbatas and the sharp Italian suits. Too imposing. Too much like Chief Adeyemi. He chose instead a simple, impeccably tailored navy blue silk shirt and dark trousers. It was still luxurious, but softer, more approachable. He wanted to be Bayo tonight. Downstairs, Kola was buzzing with a different kind of energy. "Is Miss Obi really having dinner with us?" he asked for the 5th time, straightening his own little polo shirt. "Yes, she is," Bayo said, his voice slightly tighter than intended. "Good. I can show her my new robot design, the one with the solar-powered gripper hands." Bayo's smile was genuine. "I'm sure she'd love that." The doorbell chimed, and Bayo's heart performed an unfamiliar, lurching somersault. He took a steadying breath before nodding to the housekeeper to answer it. There she was. Nneka Obi stood in the grand foyer, and yet, she didn't seem diminished by its scale. She wore a dress of deep emerald green, a color that made her skin glow. It was elegant and modest, yet it hinted at the curves beneath. She carried a light wrap and a folder, her usual armor of professionalism. "Miss Obi, you're here," Kola exclaimed, rushing forward before Bayo could even form a greeting. Nneka's laughter filled the space, a sound that immediately made the mansion feel more like a home. "Kola, look at you. Are you ready to show me all your new ideas?" She looked up then, her eyes meeting Bayo's over his son's head. "Good evening, Chief Adeyemi. Miss Obi, welcome. Please come in." He led her to the living area, where she gracefully declined an offered drink. The official part of the meeting began. She presented her folder, showing him Kola's latest test scores, now a sea of cheerful BS and even a few bold As. She spoke of his growing confidence in class, his eagerness to participate. But Bayo was only half listening to the words. He was watching her. He watched the way her hands moved when she spoke, expressive and sure. He watched the light catch the subtle gold dust on her eyelids. He watched the way she included Kola in the conversation, speaking to him as an intellectual equal, and the way his son preened under her attention. Dinner was a revelation. Mrs. Adebayo had outdone herself with a menu of refined Nigerian classics. The conversation flowed easily, dominated by Kola's excited chatter, which Nneka guided with effortless skill. Bayo found himself contributing stories of his own, making jokes that actually landed. He felt light. At one point, Nneka complimented a dish of spicy grilled prawns. "The suya spice is perfect. It has a hint of something citrusy." Bayo looked at her, impressed. "You have a refined palate. It's a touch of dried lime peel. My mother's recipe." Their eyes held for a beat too long, a silent acknowledgement of a shared appreciation for something deeper than food. Too soon, the evening began to wind down. Kola, full of food and excitement, was ushered off to bed despite his protests, throwing a "good night, Miss Obi" over his shoulder. The grand house suddenly seemed very quiet. The air hummed with a new, potent energy. "Let me walk you to your car," Bayo offered, his voice low. "Thank you," she said softly. They stepped out into the balmy Lagos night. The sky was a velvety black, pierced by a few brave stars that competed with the distant city lights. The scent of night-blooming jasmine from his gardens hung heavy and sweet in the air. The only sounds were the crunch of their feet on the gravel driveway and the distant, muted hum of the city. They reached her modest car, a stark contrast to the luxury vehicles in his garage. The moment of departure had arrived. Professionalism demanded a handshake and a thank you. But the night, the jasmine, the shared laughter over dinner, it all demanded something else entirely. She turned to face him, her portfolio held to her chest like a shield. "Thank you for a lovely evening, Chief Adeyemi. Kola is. He's a different boy. It's a joy to see." "The thanks belong entirely to you, Nneka," he said, and her name felt like a secret on his tongue. He took a half step closer, invading the professional distance they had always maintained. What you have done. It isn't just about the grades. You gave me back my son. You saw him when I... He faltered, the admission costly for a man like him. When I could not. Her eyes were wide in the moonlight, watching him, searching his face. She didn't step back. The shield of her portfolio lowered slightly. It is my joy, she repeated, her voice barely a whisper. He could feel the heat from her skin, could smell the faint, intoxicating scent of her perfume, vanilla and neroli, mingling with the jasmine. The world had shrunk to this patch of driveway, to the space between their bodies. His control, the iron will that built an empire, finally snapped. Slowly, giving her every possible second to refuse him, he raised his hand. He didn't reach for her hand. Instead, he gently, so gently, traced the line of her jaw with the tips of his fingers. Her skin was impossibly soft. He felt her sharp intake of breath, saw her eyes darken. Neka, he breathed, the word full of everything he couldn't say. He leaned in. The world stopped. His lips brushed against hers. It was not a kiss of conquest, but of discovery. It was soft, questioning, a silent promise and a whispered thank you. It was a spark that had been smoldering for weeks, finally igniting. It tasted of hope and spicy prawns and a future he hadn't dared imagine. When he pulled back, just an inch, they were both breathless. The air crackled around them. Her lips were slightly parted, her eyes wide with shock, but not anger. A faint, beautiful blush spread across her cheeks. A car passed by on the road beyond the gates, its headlights briefly illuminating them, breaking the spell. Neka took a small, shaky step back, her hand rising unconsciously to touch her lips. I should go, she stammered. Of course, he said, his own voice rough with emotion. He opened her car door for her, his manners on autopilot while his mind reeled. She slid inside, refusing to meet his eyes, her composure thoroughly shattered. The engine started, a mundane sound in the wake of what had just happened. As she drove away, the red taillights disappearing into the night, Bayo stood alone in the driveway. He raised his own fingers to his lips, a slow smile spreading across his face. The spark had been struck, and he knew with absolute certainty that it would soon become a wildfire. The kiss on the driveway burned on Bayo's lips for days. It was a ghost of a sensation that would return at the most inopportune moments, during a tense board meeting, while reviewing a financial report, in the quiet solitude of his car. It had been a spark, and now he felt like dry tinder, waiting for the slightest breeze to ignite him completely. But the breeze, in the form of Neka Obi, had become a carefully controlled draft. Her emails, which had once been the highlight of his day, resumed with a renewed, almost fierce professionalism. The subject lines were strictly factual. Cola's weekly math assessment, suggested reading list for history. The body of the text was all business, devoid of the personal insights and gentle suggestions that had once felt like secret messages just for him. Chief Adeyemi, Kola scored 92% on his fractions test. He has mastered the concepts. We are moving on to decimals next week. Regards, Neka Obi. It was a retreat. He had crossed a line, and she had re-established the boundary with cool, polite efficiency. The realization was a physical ache in his chest. He had misread the moment. He, who prided himself on reading people, had catastrophically misread the one person who mattered. For 3 agonizing days, he wrestled with his next move. Pride told him to accept the retreat, to be the chastised billionaire. But the memory of her lips yielding to his for that one fleeting second told him something else entirely. It told him the attraction was mutual. Her retreat wasn't from him. It was from the complication he represented. On the 4th day, his patience shattered. He couldn't focus on anything. The silence from her was a louder noise than any in Lagos. He picked up his phone, a device that usually connected him to prime ministers and CEOs, and used it to perform the most nerve-wracking act of his adult life. He called her. It rang 3 times, each tone a hammer blow to his sternum. He was about to hang up, to preserve the last shred of his dignity, when she answered. Hello? Her voice was cautious, a little breathless. Neka. He said her name like a sigh of relief. It's Bayo. Pause. Chief Adeyemi. Is everything all right with Kola? The formality was a shield. Kola is fine. Brilliant, thanks to you. He took a breath, plunging into the abyss. I'm calling about the other night. I acted out of turn. I overstepped. It was unprofessional of me, and I apologize if I made you uncomfortable. The silence on the other end stretched. He could almost hear her thinking, weighing his words. You didn't make me uncomfortable, she said finally, her voice softer, the shield lowering a fraction. You surprised me. This is complicated, Bayo. Hearing her say his name was a victory. I know it is, he said, his voice low and earnest. And I respect your professionalism more than you can know, which is why I am asking you, not as Kola's father to his teacher, but as Bayo, the man who cannot stop thinking about you, to have dinner with me. Somewhere discreet. Somewhere we can talk. Just talk. Another long pause. He held his breath. Just talk? She asked, a hint of her old warmth of teasing returning to her voice. Scout's honor, he vowed, a smile touching his lips for the first time in days. He could hear the smile in her voice when she replied. Okay, yes, but somewhere very discreet. The first date was at a secluded, family-owned Lebanese restaurant in Aikja, known for its incredible food and its discretion. He arrived first, a bundle of nerves he hadn't felt since he was a teenager. When she walked in, wearing a simple black dress that made his breath catch, the world narrowed to just her. The conversation was initially stilted, a delicate dance around the giant elephant in the room, their undeniable chemistry and the reasons they shouldn't act on it. He told her about his late wife, the grief that had shaped him, the fear of failing as a father. She spoke of her large, loving family in Enugu, the pressure to succeed on her own terms, and her deep-seated fear of being seen as a cliché, the gold-digging teacher who snagged a billionaire. I have built my career on my integrity, Bayo, she said, her eyes serious over the rim of her wine glass. I will not have it reduced to gossip. Your integrity is one of the things I admire most about you, he said, meaning every word. I would never do anything to jeopardize that. They talked for hours, long after the plates were cleared. The just talk rule held, but the air between them crackled with everything left unsaid. He drove her home in his least conspicuous car, a black Range Rover, and the goodnight kiss he wanted so desperately to steal remained unclaimed. He simply took her hand, brought it to his lips, and pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles. Thank you for tonight, Neka, he said, his voice husky. She looked stunned, touched by the old-world gesture. Thank you, Bayo. The dam had been breached. Their dates became their secret world. Long drives along the Lekki Ape Expressway with the windows down, the salty Atlantic air mixing with her perfume. Private viewings at art galleries after hours, where they could debate the meaning of a sculpture without an audience. A picnic, arranged by his driver, on the empty beach near his private property, where they shared suya and laughter under the stars. The physical attraction was a constant, humming undercurrent. A brush of his hand against the small of her back as he guided her through a door sent a jolt through him. The way her shoulder would press against his arm in the car, the heat of her seeping through his clothes. The scent of her, vanilla and narrowly, lingered on his clothes long after he dropped her off, a tormenting reminder of her presence. He was a man of immense control, but with her, he felt himself unraveling. He wanted to know the taste of her skin, the sound of his name on her lips in the dark, the feel of her body yielding to his. But he held back. This was a dance and she was leading. He would follow her steps, no matter how slow the tempo, because the promise of the music was the sweetest thing he had ever heard. He was falling, not with the reckless abandon of youth, but with the deep, terrifying certainty of a man who had found his missing piece. The chaste kiss on the knuckles had become Bayo's signature goodbye, a gesture of reverence that left Neka flustered and utterly charmed. It was a promise, a testament to his patience and the depth of his regard for her. But with each date, The space between that genteel goodbye and the searing kiss on the driveway grew wider, filled with a tension that was becoming exquisite torture. They had settled into a rhythm. Their secret world, built of whispered conversations in dark restaurants and the shared solitude of long drives, felt both fragile and unshakably real. The professional emails had slowly regained their previous warmth, now laced with a new, private subtext. Chief Adeyemi, Kola's essay on renewable energy was the best in the class. His argument for solar power in rural communities was particularly compelling. Perhaps this is a topic he'd enjoy discussing over dinner? Nneka had read the last sentence a dozen times, imagining the slight smile on her face as she typed it. The occasion was another progress report dinner at the mansion. This time, however, the air was different. Kola, now thriving and brimming with confidence, dominated the conversation with a detailed plan for a school science fair project he and Nneka were designing. Bayo watched them, his heart so full it felt like a physical pressure in his chest. They were a unit, the three of them. Felt natural, right? After Kola was reluctantly sent to bed, Bayo and Nneka migrated to the living room. The vast space was lit only by a single large floor lamp, casting intimate pools of light and shadow. He poured them each a small glass of amber-colored cognac, his fingers brushing hers as he handed her the crystal snifter. The simple contact sent a jolt through him. They sat on the large sofa, a respectful foot of space between them, but the energy that crackled in that space was a live wire. "He's a different boy," Bayo said, swirling the cognac in his glass. "You've not just helped him with school. You've given him his confidence back." "He had it in him all along," Nneka replied softly, taking a small sip. "He just needed to be seen." She looked at him over the rim of her glass. "You see him now." "I do," he said, his voice low. "And I see you." The air grew thick. The unspoken thing that had been building for weeks was now a presence in the room, undeniable and potent. I never expected this," Nneka said, her voice barely a whisper, her gaze fixed on the liquid in her glass. "Neither did I," he admitted. He shifted on the sofa, turning his body towards her, closing that foot of distance. "I thought my life was set. My work, my son. It was a complete picture. Or so I thought." He reached out, not to kiss her, but to gently take the glass from her trembling hand and set it on the table beside his. "Then you walked into my office and showed me the cracks in the frame, and you started filling them with light." Her breath hitched as he turned fully to face her, one arm resting on the back of the sofa behind her, not touching, but caging her in. "Nneka," he breathed, his eyes dark with an intensity that made her shiver. "This dance we've been doing, this discreet, delicate dance. I need to know if we're dancing toward something, because I can't keep pretending that a kiss on the hand is enough." He brought his hand up, his thumb stroking her cheekbone with a tenderness that belied the raw need in his eyes. "I have been patient. I have been a gentleman. But every second I spend with you, I want less of the gentleman and more of the man." Nneka's eyes were wide, her lips slightly parted. The war within her was visible, the fear of complication against the overwhelming pull of her own desire. She had tried so hard to be professional, to be careful, but in this moment, with his touch branding her skin, it all seemed pointless. "Bayo," she whispered, a surrender and a plea. It was all the permission he needed. He leaned in slowly, giving her one last moment to retreat. She didn't. Her eyes fluttered closed. This kiss was nothing like the first. That had been a spark, a question. This was an answer. It was deep, hungry, and utterly consuming. It was the release of weeks of pent-up longing and restrained passion. His hand slid from her cheek into her hair, angling her head to deepen the kiss. Her hands, which had been clenched in her lap, came up to clutch at the soft fabric of his shirt, pulling him closer. The taste of cognac on her lips was intoxicating. The soft sound she made in the back of her throat unraveled the last of his control. He explored her mouth with a possessiveness that was both thrilling and devastating, and she met him with a passion that matched his own, her fingers digging into his shoulders. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathless, foreheads resting together. The world outside the pool of lamplight had ceased to exist. "Stay," he murmured against her lips, his voice rough with desire. "Please stay tonight." Neka pulled back just enough to look into his eyes. The fear was still there, but it was now eclipsed by a dazed, wondrous hunger. The line they had been towing had been crossed. There was no going back. She searched his face, seeing not just the powerful billionaire, but the man who had been patient, who revered her, who looked at her as if she held the universe in her hands. Slowly, her heart hammering against her ribs, she nodded. A shudder of pure relief and want went through him. He stood, taking her hands in his and pulling her to her feet. He didn't lead her to the guest wing. He led her towards the grand staircase, towards his private sanctuary. They crossed the threshold of his bedroom, and as the door closed behind them, the delicate dance was over. The music had changed, and now, there was only the raw, beating rhythm of their hearts. The world inside Bayo's penthouse had become a universe of its own. A sanctuary where the only things that mattered were whispered secrets, tangled sheets, and the profound connection that deepened with every passing hour. For 2 weeks, they existed in a blissful bubble. Neka would arrive discreetly after school, spending evenings with Kola and nights with Bayo, leaving before the sun rose to maintain the fragile facade of professionalism. Bayo felt like a man reborn. The weight of his empire felt lighter, the silence of his mansion filled with her laughter and the easy chatter of his now thriving son. He was, for the first time in a decade, genuinely happy. The bubble was pristine, and it was inevitable that it would burst. It was a lazy Sunday morning, a rare luxury. Kola was at a friend's house. They had ventured out for a late breakfast at a small, secluded cafe tucked away in Victoria Island, believing their anonymity was secure. For an hour, it was perfect. Bayo fed her a piece of almond croissant from his fork, and she laughed, swatting his hand away, her eyes sparkling in the sunlight. He captured the moment on his phone. A candid, slightly blurred photo of her mid-laugh, breathtakingly beautiful and utterly unguarded. He didn't post it. He would never be so careless. He simply saved it to a private folder, a digital treasure. But his security, his world of firewalls and encrypted servers, was designed for corporate espionage, not for the predatory lens of a gossip columnist with a powerful telephoto camera. The headline hit the digital newsstands 2 days later. It was on the front page of Naija Gossip Pulse, the most notorious tabloid in Lagos. Billionaire's extracurricular lessons. Chief Adeyemi's son's teacher gets an A+. Beneath the vicious headline was a series of photos. The clearest one was from the cafe. Bayo leaning across the table, his hand near her face, gazing at her with an expression of naked adoration. Another, grainier shot showed them getting into his car outside her apartment building. The article was a masterpiece of insinuation, questioning her professionalism, his judgment, and reducing their relationship to a tawdry cliché. Bayo saw it first. His public relations team had an alert system. His phone erupted at 6 a.m. with a frantic call from his head of PR. His blood ran cold as he read the article, a cold fury settling in his gut. His first and only thought was of her. Neka's phone began to ring as she was preparing for school. It was her friend, Uche, another teacher at the prestigious Green Oaks Academy. Her voice a panicked whisper. "Neka, have you seen it? Oh my God. Have you seen Naija Gossip Pulse?" Neka's world tilted on its axis as she pulled up the site. The blood drained from her face. There she was, splashed across the internet for the world to see and judge. The intimate moment, stolen and twisted into something cheap and salacious. The comments were already a cesspool. Vile speculations about her motives, her character, her morality. She arrived at school a ghost, her hands trembling. The whispers started the moment she walked through the gates. Students snickered behind their hands. Colleagues she considered friends offered tight, pitying smiles before looking away. The air was thick with judgment. It culminated in a summons to the principal's office during her free period. Principal Adeola, a stern woman in her 60s, did not offer her a seat. The tabloid article was printed out and lying on the desk between them like an indictment. "Miss Obi, she began, her voice dripping with icy disappointment. This is deeply unfortunate. A situation like this, the perception of impropriety, can be incredibly damaging to the reputation of Green Oaks Academy. Principal Adeola, Nneka started, her voice shaking with a mixture of fear and rage. What is being implied is not the truth. My relationship with Chief Adeyemi is a private, personal matter. It has never affected my professionalism with Kola or any of my students. The fact that you call it a relationship is the problem, the principal snapped. You are his son's teacher. There is an inherent power imbalance. Parents are calling. They are concerned. They are questioning the environment their children are in. She leaned forward, her expression grim. Your close personal involvement with a parent is, at the very least, a catastrophic error in judgment. I suggest you take some time to consider your position. We will be reviewing it. Nneka left the office, her vision blurry with humiliated tears. She felt dirty, reduced to a stereotype. Every dream she had worked for, her career, her reputation, was crumbling because of a stolen photo and vicious gossip. She didn't call Bayo. She went home, feeling utterly alone. She curled up on her bed, the four walls of her small apartment feeling like they were closing in on her. When Bayo finally got through to her, his voice was a low, urgent rumble of concern. Nneka? My love, are you all right? I saw it. I'm so sorry. I'm handling it. The dam broke. Handling it? She cried, her voice cracking with a pain he had never heard before. How can you handle this, Bayo? My principal just threatened my job. My colleagues are looking at me like I'm a prostitute. This is my life. This is the career I built with my own two hands. I will not be a scandal for you. I will not be something you need to hide or be ashamed of. Some dirty little secret that threatens your precious empire. Her words were laced with a fury born of fear and powerlessness. She was not a woman who could simply ignore the court of public opinion. Her world was not built of boardrooms and billionaire deals that could withstand any storm. Hers was built on trust and respect, and it felt like it was washing away with the tide of gossip. On the other end of the line, Bayo listened, his heart breaking. He heard not just her anger, but her devastation. He heard the fracture he had caused by pulling her into his world. The storm had arrived, and the woman he loved was drowning in it, and he knew, with a terrifying certainty, that his money and power were useless if he couldn't make this right for her. The raw pain in Nneka's voice on the phone had been a physical blow. Bayo had spent his life fixing problems, acquiring companies, silencing rivals, negotiating deals. But this was different. This was a wound he had inadvertently inflicted on the person he cherished most, and no amount of money could retract the vicious headlines or the judgmental stares. He had tried to tell her he was handling it, but her furious, heartbroken response had shown him how inadequate his response had been. Handling it meant issuing a terse no comment through his PR team, perhaps threatening the tabloid with a lawsuit. It was a defensive corporate strategy designed to protect the brand of Chief Adeyemi. But Nneka wasn't a brand. She was his heart, and she needed to be protected not with legal threats, but with a shield of absolute, unwavering certainty. He ended the call with her, his mind already shifting gears. The cold, calculating part of his brain, the part that built an empire, took over. But this time it was not deployed for profit or power. It was deployed for love. He made 2 calls. The first was to his head of security. I want the editor of Naija Gossip Pulse in my office in 1 hour. Make it happen. The tone left no room for argument. The second was to his head of public relations. Clear the ballroom at the Grand Imperial Hotel. I'm holding a press conference in 2 hours. Get every major news outlet, every blogger, every journalist in Lagos there. No excuses. The editor, a sweaty, nervous man named Chidi, was ushered into Bayo's office exactly 57 minutes later. Bayo didn't offer him a seat. He simply turned his computer monitor around, showing the vile article. You have 1 hour, Bayo said, his voice dangerously quiet, to take this down, not just from your site, from the internet. Every archive, every scrap, every shared link. You will issue a full retraction and a public apology to Miss Obi for your defamatory insinuations. Chidi puffed out his chest, attempting bravado. Chief Adeyemi, this is a free press. We have sources, we have photos. Bayo cut him off, his eyes glacial. You have 1 hour. If you don't, I will not sue you. I will buy your pathetic rag, fire you and your entire staff, and turn your server room into a storage closet. This isn't a negotiation. It's an extinction-level event for your career. Do you understand? The color drained from Chida's face. He understood perfectly. He scrambled out of the office without another word. An hour later, the article vanished. But Bayo wasn't done. Retraction was not redemption. He needed to make a statement so powerful, so definitive, that no one would ever dare question NECA's integrity again. At the Grand Imperial Hotel, the ballroom was packed. Cameras flashed, journalists murmured, all wondering what the reclusive billionaire could possibly want to announce. Bayo stood in the wings, adjusting his tie. He wasn't wearing one of his flamboyant agbadas. He chose a powerful, impeccably tailored black suit, the armor of a modern warrior. It was serious, respectful, and conveyed immense authority. Beside him stood NECA. He had sent a car for her, and his head of security had practically bundled her inside. She was pale, her eyes red-rimmed, wearing a simple but elegant cream-colored dress he had sent with the car. "Bayo, what is this?" she had asked, her voice still thick with tears. "I can't face them." "You don't have to say a word," he had promised her, taking her hands. "You just have to stand next to me. Let me do this. Let me fix this." And then he had brought Kola down. His son, confused by the tension but sensing his father's resolve, had taken NECA's hand. "It's okay, Miss Obi," he had said with heartbreaking sincerity. Now, the three of them stood as a unit. Family. The PR head gave the signal. Bayo took a deep breath, squeezed NECA's hand, and walked into the storm of flashing lights, with his son and the woman he loved flanking him. He stepped up to the forest of microphones, his gaze sweeping over the crowd, commanding silence without saying a word. "Thank you for coming," he began, his voice resonating through the room, calm and utterly sure. "I called you here today because of a piece of fiction published this morning. A fiction that attacked the character of an extraordinary woman and, in doing so, attacked my family." He paused, letting the word family hang in the air. "This is not a scandal," he stated, his voice hardening. "This is my life. This is Miss NECA Obi." He turned slightly, gesturing to her. The cameras went into a frenzy. "She is the most brilliant, compassionate, and honorable woman I have ever known. She is a dedicated educator who saw the genius in my son when everyone else, including his own father, saw failure." He looked directly into the cameras, his expression fierce with protectiveness. "She has my deepest respect, my unwavering loyalty, and my heart. Any insult to her is an insult to me, and will be treated not as gossip, but as slander." He then looked down at Kola, and his expression softened. "And she has the love and respect of my son, which is the highest accolade anyone in my world can receive." He put his arm around NECA, pulling her and Kola close in a powerful, united front. "So, let me be perfectly clear. NECA Obi is not a secret. She is not a scandal. She is my future. And from this moment forward, we will not be addressing this again. The conversation is over." The room erupted in questions, but Bayo ignored them. He had said what he came to say. He turned, shielding NECA from the cameras with his body, and led his family off the stage. In the sudden silence of the wings, NECA looked up at him, her eyes wide with shock, awe, and a dawning, overwhelming relief. The weight of the shame, the judgment, had been lifted from her shoulders by the sheer, unassailable force of his declaration. He had not just defended her. He had claimed her before the entire world. He had taken the scandal and, with breathtaking audacity, transformed it into a love story. The storm wasn't over, but he had built an ark, and they were all safely inside. The ride from the Grand Imperial Hotel was silent, but it was a silence filled with the deafening echo of what had just transpired. Bayo sat in the back of the armored SUV, his body angled toward Neka, his hand enveloping hers. She hadn't let go since they left the stage. She stared out the window, not seeing the passing Lagos traffic, her free hand occasionally lifting to wipe away a stray tear that escaped despite her best efforts. They were not tears of sadness, but of catharsis, the release of a terrible, crushing pressure. He didn't press her to speak. He simply held her hand, his thumb stroking slow, soothing circles on her skin, a silent anchor in her whirling emotions. The car didn't head toward her apartment or his mansion in Ikoyi. Instead, it moved with purpose toward the Lekki-Ikoyi Link Bridge, heading for the exclusive, peninsula communities where the city's elite found seclusion. "Where are we going?" Neka finally asked, her voice hoarse from suppressed tears. "Somewhere we can breathe," Bayo said softly. "Somewhere with no cameras, no whispers, no past. Just us." They pulled up to a high-security gate that swung open silently, revealing a long, palm-lined driveway that ended at a stunning, modern beach house. It was all clean lines, expansive glass, and weathered wood, designed to blend into the dunes and the sea beyond. The Atlantic Ocean stretched out before it, an endless expanse of blue under the late afternoon sun. "This is yours?" Neka whispered, stepping out of the car, the salt air filling her lungs. "A retreat," he said, coming to stand beside her. "I come here when the world gets too loud, and today the world was far too loud for you." He led her inside. The interior was breathtakingly simple and elegant. The entire back of the house was glass, opening onto a wide deck and the private beach beyond. The decor was a palette of creams, whites, and blues, punctuated by pieces of driftwood and original art. It was the antithesis of his formal Ikoyi mansion. It was a sanctuary. Bayo dismissed the staff with a quiet word, and suddenly, they were utterly alone. The only sound was the rhythmic crash of waves and the cry of distant gulls. The formality of the press conference, the armor of his suit, the defiance. It all began to melt away in the face of this profound peace. Bayo shed his suit jacket and loosened his tie, looking more like himself than he had all day. Neka walked to the glass wall, watching the waves roll in. "What you did today," she began, her back to him. "You stood in front of the entire world for me. You called me your family." He came to stand behind her, not touching her, but close enough that she could feel his warmth. "I only spoke the truth." She turned to face him, her eyes searching his. The vulnerability she saw there mirrored her own. The billionaire was gone. In his place was just Bayo, the man who had laid his heart bare and risked everything for her. "They were going to fire me," she said, the words still aching with the fresh memory of the humiliation. "She made me feel so small, so cheap." His expression darkened with a flicker of the fury head shown the editor. "No one will ever make you feel that way again. I promise you." He reached out then, his hands coming up to cradle her face, his thumbs gently wiping the remnants of tears from her cheeks. The touch was infinitely tender, a balm on her bruised spirit. "You are the strongest woman I know, Neka Obi," he murmured, his voice a low vibration that she felt in her soul. "You stood your ground in my office when I was ready to dismiss you. You saw my son's heart when I was blind to it. You built a career on your own merit and integrity. Never let the small-mindedness of others make you forget who you are." His words were the final key that unlocked the last of her defenses. The last of the tension drained from her body, and she leaned into his touch, closing her eyes. He leaned down and kissed her. It was not the hungry, desperate kiss from the driveway, nor the passionate claiming of the living room sofa. This kiss was different. It was slow, deep, and full of a profound reverence. It was a kiss of healing, of gratitude, of welcome. It was a kiss that said, "You are safe. You are home." When they finally parted, the world outside had turned to gold with the setting sun. The crisis was over. The battle was won. And now, on their own private island, they were finally free to explore the peace they had fought for, and the desire that had been simmering beneath the surface for what felt like a lifetime. The quiet space between them was no longer filled with tension, but with a sweet, aching anticipation of what was to come. The golden light of sunset bled into the deep indigo of twilight, painting the sky in a watercolor of fire and ink. The rhythmic crash of waves was the only sound in their private world. The kiss on the deck had been a seal on their sanctuary, a silent vow that the outside world no longer existed. Beo felt the shift in the air between them. The tenderness of comfort was now laced with a potent, electric anticipation. He took her hand, his fingers lacing through hers. "Come," he said, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through her. He led her back through the great room, now shadowed and intimate in the dimming light, and down a hallway to the primary suite. The room was a masterpiece of minimalist luxury. A vast platform bed, dressed in crisp white linen, dominated the space, facing another wall of glass that opened onto a private section of the deck and the endless, moonlit ocean beyond. Neka paused at the threshold, her breath catching. It wasn't the opulence that struck her, but the raw, romantic intimacy of it. The room felt like the inside of a seashell, smooth, private, and bathed in the silvery glow of the rising moon. Beo turned to face her, his back to the spectacular view. He was silhouetted against the night sea, a powerful figure outlined in silver. "We don't have to," he began, his voice husky, giving her one last, crucial chance to set the pace. She stepped into the room, closing the distance between them. She placed a hand on his chest, feeling the strong, steady beat of his heart beneath the fine cotton of his shirt. "I'm not afraid," she whispered, and it was true. The fear and anxiety of the day had been burned away by the ferocity of his protection and the peace of this place. All that remained was a deep, thrumming want. That was all the confirmation he needed. He brought his hands up to frame her face again, but this time his touch was different. It was not just tender. It was possessive, hungry. He claimed her mouth in a kiss that was anything but gentle. It was a conflagration. It was weeks of pent-up desire, of stolen glances and chaste goodnights, finally unleashed. Neka met his hunger with her own, her fingers scrambling to undo the buttons of his shirt, desperate to feel his skin against hers. The sophisticated dress shirt, a symbol of his corporate power, was pushed from his shoulders, revealing the powerful, sculpted chest beneath. His skin was warm and smooth under her palms, and she felt him shudder at her touch. His own hands were not idle. He found the hidden zipper of her cream dress and slowly drew it down. The fabric whispered to the floor at her feet, pooling around her like sea foam. She stood before him in the moonlight, clad only in simple lace, more beautiful than any masterpiece in his art collection. "Alawami," he breathed, the Yoruba endearment. "My owner, my wealth," falling from his lips with a reverence that made her knees weak. "You are so beautiful." He lifted her into his arms as if she weighed nothing and carried her to the bed, laying her down on the cool, crisp linen. He followed her down, his weight a welcome anchor as he worshipped her with his hands and his mouth. He learned the landscape of her body with a patience that belied his own evident need, the sensitive hollow of her throat, the graceful curve of her waist, the softness of her inner thighs. He was a generous lover, attentive and utterly focused on her pleasure. Every sigh, every gasp, every tremble was a note in a symphony he was conducting solely for her. When his mouth found the core of her, she cried out, her fingers tangling in his hair as a wave of sensation, sharp and sweet, crashed over her. When she could bear it no longer, she pulled him up, her eyes dark with need. "I want you," she pleaded, her voice raw. "Now, Beo, please." He needed no further urging. He sheathed himself in protection, his eyes never leaving hers. He entered her in one slow, deliberate stroke, filling her completely. They both stilled, overcome by the shocking rightness of the connection. For Neka, it was a revelation. His powerful body, a symbol of his strength in the world, was now a source of exquisite tenderness and breathtaking passion. It was an intimacy far beyond the physical. It was a soul-deep merging. Then the rhythm began. It was not frantic, but a slow, building crescendo of need and release. It was a conversation without words, a physical affirmation of everything they had already come to mean to each other. The world narrowed to the feel of his skin against hers, the sound of his ragged breaths in her ear, the scent of his cologne mixed with the salt air. When the climax finally tore through them, it was simultaneous. It was a silent, shattering wave that left them breathless and clinging to each other, their bodies slick with sweat, their hearts hammering against each other's ribs in a frantic, synchronized rhythm. In the aftermath, Bayo gathered her against him, pulling the sheets over them. She rested her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat gradually slow to a steady, comforting rhythm. He pressed a kiss to her damp forehead, his arms holding her as if she were the most precious thing he had ever held. No words were needed. The storm of the day had passed, and in its wake, they had found their calm. They had crossed the final threshold, and in the quiet of the moonlit night, wrapped in each other and the sound of the sea, they knew nothing would ever be the same again. Dawn broke over the Atlantic in a slow, glorious blaze of pink and orange, painting streaks of light across the bedroom floor. Nneka awoke not to the blare of an alarm, but to the steady, solid rhythm of a heartbeat beneath her ear and the salt-kissed air drifting through the open glass doors. For a disorienting moment, she didn't know where she was. Then the memories of the previous day, the terror of the scandal, the awe of his defense, the life-altering intimacy of the night, crashed over her in a warm, overwhelming wave. She was in Bayo's arms, in his sanctuary, and the world had not ended. It had, in fact, begun anew. She shifted slightly to look at him. Bayo was still asleep, the stern lines of his face softened in slumber. In the gentle morning light, he looked younger, the weight of his empire momentarily lifted. Her heart contracted with a fierce, protective love. This was the man behind the title, the father, the protector, the vulnerable lover. As if sensing her gaze, his eyes fluttered open. For a heartbeat, there was a flicker of something wonderment, as if he couldn't believe she was really there, before a slow, deeply satisfied smile spread across his face. "Good morning," he murmured, his voice rough with sleep. He tightened his arm around her, pulling her closer to bury his face in her hair, inhaling deeply. "I was afraid I'd dreamed you." Nneka laughed softly, a sound of pure contentment. Not a dream. They lay there for a long time, wrapped in the quiet and each other, watching the sun climb higher over the water. It was a luxury Nneka had never known. Unhurried time, a silence that was comfortable and full, not empty. Eventually, Bayo rose, pulling on a pair of low-slung lounge pants. He was breathtakingly casual, a side of him she had never seen. He brought back a tray with fresh coffee, pastries, and a bowl of exotic fruit. They ate breakfast in bed, laughing and talking, the events of the previous day receding like the tide. It was in this cocoon of peace that the future began to take shape. Nneka, feeling bold and inspired, curled her legs beneath her and turned to him. "You know," she began, "all of this, the scandal, the attention, it started because of my work with Kola, because I'm a teacher." Bayo's expression grew serious, attentive. He nodded for her to continue. "I've always had this dream," she said, her eyes lighting up with a passion he adored. "Not just to teach in one classroom, but to build something, a foundation, a place that doesn't just teach children what to think, but how to think. A school for the gifted but underserved, where kids like Kola, creative, brilliant minds that don't fit the standard mold, can thrive. Where they're not just given extra lessons, but are mentored, inspired, shown the practical application of their ideas." She spoke with her hands, her vision spilling out of her. She talked about STEM labs, art studios, partnerships with tech firms for internships, a curriculum built on innovation and critical thinking, not rote memorization. Bayo listened, utterly captivated. He wasn't just hearing a dream. He was seeing the blueprint of a legacy. This was not the vague desire of someone wanting to do good. This was the well-researched, passionately held mission of a visionary. When she finished, slightly breathless, she looked at him almost shyly. "It's probably a silly, expensive dream." Bayo reached out, taking her hand and bringing it to his lips. "It is the least silly, most brilliant idea I have ever heard." His eyes held hers, gleaming with excitement. "Neka, this is it. This is what we should do." "We?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "We," he affirmed, his tone leaving no room for doubt. "You have the vision, the pedagogy, the heart. I have the resources, the connections, the real estate. This isn't a donation. This is a partnership." The word hung in the air between them. Partnership. It meant more than collaboration. It meant a merging of their lives, their purposes. He got out of bed, his energy infectious, and grabbed a tablet from the bedside table. He sat back down, pulling up a notes app. "Tell me everything again." Slower this time. For the next 2 hours, the billionaire and the teacher sat cross-legged on the rumpled bedsheets, the breakfast tray pushed aside, designing a future. Bayo fired off questions about funding, infrastructure, and legal frameworks, his business acumen seamlessly aligning with her educational expertise. He didn't dominate. He facilitated, using his power to make her dream bigger, bolder. "Well, call it the Kola Adeyemi Foundation," Bayo said suddenly, looking up from the tablet. Neka's eyes filled with tears. "Bayo, no. That's too much. This is my dream." "It's our dream," he corrected gently. "And it was Kola who brought us together. His is the mind you first saw. It's only fitting. This foundation. It's the positive that comes from the negative. It's our answer to the gossip." In that moment, Neka saw the full measure of the man. His wealth was not just for acquiring. It was for building. And he wanted to build her dream. He was offering her not just his heart, but his empire as a tool for her vision. He saw a legacy that was about more than buildings and bank accounts. It was about changing lives, just as she had changed theirs. And as they sat there, the sun warming the room, weaving their hopes and plans together, Neka knew that their bond had deepened in a way she hadn't thought possible. They were no longer just lovers. They were co-conspirators in building a better world, their souls irrevocably intertwined in purpose and passion. The idyllic seclusion of the beach house couldn't last forever, though Bayo and Neka both privately wished it could. The real world, with its complexities and judgments, awaited. But they returned to Lagos not as they had left, a billionaire and his secret lover fleeing a scandal, but as a united front, armed with a shared purpose and a quiet confidence. The first test was the most daunting: family. For Bayo, this meant formally introducing Neka to the Adeyemi clan. A Sunday lunch was organized at the Ikoyi mansion, an event that usually felt to Bayo like a corporate board meeting with more jollof rice. Neka was a bundle of nerves. What if they think I'm a gold digger? What if they bring up the articles? She fretted, pacing the length of his bedroom as he dressed. Bayo caught her mid-pace, pulling her into his arms. "My auntie will ask you 3 questions. Where you're from, what you do, and what your plans are. Answer with the confidence I see in you every day, and you will have won her over. And if anyone mentions that trash," he said, his voice hardening slightly, "they will answer to me." He was right. The Adeyemi family, a collection of sharp-eyed aunts, uncles, and successful cousins, received her with a polite, scrutinizing curiosity. But Neka, in an elegant mint green dress, was impeccable. She spoke of Enugu with pride, of her teaching with passion, and when Auntie Folake, the formidable matriarch, subtly probed about her intentions, Neka smiled warmly. "My intention is to make Bayo and Kola happy, and to continue my work educating children," she said, her hand resting gently on Bayo's arm. "Hopefully on a larger scale soon." It was the perfect answer, traditional enough to satisfy, yet hinting at a modern ambition they could respect. By the time dessert was served, Auntie Folake was offering her a recipe for ofe nsala. The greater challenge, however, lay in a different direction. A week later, they boarded his private jet, a necessity for the trip, not a luxury, he insisted, and flew to Enugu. This was Neka's world, and Bayo was the outsider. The Obi family home was a vibrant, chaotic, and loving contrast to the Adeyemi mansion. The compound was full of laughter, the scent of spicy cooking, and the loud, cheerful arguments of a large family. When Bayo's sleek car pulled up, what felt like a small village poured out to greet them. NECA was immediately swallowed by a swarm of siblings, aunts, and cousins, all talking at once. Bayo stood by the car, a tall, elegant figure in a simple but obviously expensive cotton shirt and trousers, looking more out of place than he had in his entire life. NECA's father, Papa Obi, a retired professor with kind eyes behind thick glasses, approached him first. "So, you are the chief," he said, not with deference, but with a calm assessment. "Please, sir, call me Bayo," he said, extending his hand. Papa Obi shook it, his grip firm. Then came the real test. NECA's 5 brothers, all of them tall and built like athletes, formed a semicircle around him. The eldest, Chinidu, eyed the car, then Bayo. "This is how you come to ask about our sister? With a machine that costs more than our entire street?" Before Bayo could formulate a diplomatic answer, a cacophony of sound erupted from the house. NECA's numerous nieces and nephews, led by Kola, who was having the time of his life, charged into the yard with a worn football. The ball rolled to a stop at Bayo's feet. One of the brothers, a midfielder for a local team, grinned. "Let's see what you're made of, Oga Chief." For the next hour, the billionaire CEO was stripped of his titles. He was just Bayo, scrambling in the dust of the compound, being thoroughly outplayed by NECA's brothers and ruthlessly teased by a pack of children. He slipped, he laughed, he scored a clumsy goal, and was promptly tackled by a 6-year-old niece who declared herself the goalie. Sweaty, disheveled, and happier than he could remember, he finally collapsed onto a bench next to Papa Obi. Head lost his shoes. NECA brought him a cold bottle of Malta Guinness, her eyes shining with amusement and love. Papa Obi watched his sons clap a dusty Bayo on the back, now including him in their jokes. He nodded slowly, a smile touching his lips. "A man who is not too proud to play football with children in the dust is a man who understands family," he said quietly to NECA. That evening, sitting on plastic chairs under the stars, eating spicy suya from a roadside vendor, Bayo was no longer Chief Adeyemi. He was just Bayo, the man who loved NECA Obi. Her mother told embarrassing stories about her childhood. Her brothers demanded to know his intentions, and her little nieces braided flowers into his hair. He looked around at the loud, messy, loving chaos, and he felt a sense of belonging he hadn't felt since he was a boy. This wasn't the quiet, ordered respect of his family. This was something else entirely. It was vibrant, demanding, and real. Later, as they prepared to leave, NECA's mother pulled her aside. "He looks at you the way your father looked at me," she said, her voice soft, "and he makes you laugh. That is a good foundation. The money," she waved a dismissive hand, "is just the wrapper. It is the sweetness inside that matters." Standing by the car, covered in dust and with a flower still tucked behind his ear, Bayo kissed NECA goodbye, promising to return in a week. He wasn't just welcomed, he was adopted. As the jet climbed into the night sky, leaving the warm lights of Enugu behind, Bayo knew a profound truth. He had spent his life building a fortress of wealth, thinking it would protect him. But true security wasn't in the walls he built. It was in the love he let in. NECA had given him back his son, and now she had given him a family. The year that followed was a masterclass in building a life. The scandal became a distant, forgotten memory, replaced by the tangible reality of their partnership. The Kola Adeyemi Foundation moved from sketches on a tablet to architectural plans, then to a physical plot of land on the outskirts of Lagos where construction was underway. Bayo, the master strategist, handled the logistics, the permits, and the funding. NECA, the visionary, designed the curriculum, interviewed inspiring teachers, and poured her soul into every detail, from the light-filled classrooms to the interactive science labs. They were a perfect, formidable team. In boardrooms, they were co-chairs, her insightful questions often cutting to the heart of an issue his more linear mind had overlooked. At home, they were partners, debating foundation strategies over dinner with Kola, who offered surprisingly astute suggestions. Their love, forged in fire and tempered by peace, had settled into a deep, unwavering constant. It was in the way he'd bring her a cup of tea exactly how she liked it when she was working late. It was in the way she'd smooth his tie before a big meeting, her touch stilling the last of his nerves. They had built a world together, a beautiful, purposeful world, and Bayo knew with every fiber of his being that he never wanted to live in a world without her in it. The idea of the ring had come to him months ago. He didn't want just any diamond. He wanted a stone as unique and profound as she was. Head worked with a renowned jeweler in Antwerp, sourcing a flawless, emerald-cut diamond that held fire and ice in its depths, set on a simple, elegant band of platinum. It was timeless, strong, and breathtakingly beautiful, like his Nneka. He planned the evening with the precision of a military operation, but with the heart of a poet. He chose the restaurant where they'd had their first real date, the secluded Lebanese place in Ikja. He booked the entire terrace for a private dinner, ensuring absolute intimacy. When the evening arrived, Nneka, suspecting a celebration for securing a Major Foundation donor, wore a dress of deep sapphire blue that made her skin glow. Bayo felt his breath catch when he saw her, as it always did. Dinner was a leisurely, beautiful affair. They talked about the foundation, about Kola's latest school project, about everything and nothing. But as the night wore on, Bayo grew quieter, more introspective. Nneka noticed, her brow furrowing slightly. "Is everything all right? You seem preoccupied." He reached across the table, taking her hand. "I am just incredibly happy," he said, "and it was the truth. And so grateful for you." He signaled the waiter, who cleared the dessert plates. The string quartet head hired, hidden discreetly behind a screen, began to play a soft, romantic melody that was her favorite. Nneka's eyes widened, her playful suspicion deepening. "Bayo, what is all this?" Instead of answering, he stood up, his chair scraping softly on the terrace tiles. He walked over to her side of the table, the world narrowing to the space between them. The city lights twinkled below them, but they were in their own private galaxy. He took both her hands in his, pulling her gently to her feet. His heart was hammering against his ribs, a nervous, joyful rhythm. "Nneka," he began, his voice low and thick with emotion. "The day you walked into my office, I was a man living in a fortress of my own making. I had everything, and yet I had nothing. You didn't just see my son. You saw me. You taught my son how to learn. You taught me how to feel." Tears welled in her eyes, already sensing what was coming. "You are my greatest lesson and my most precious gift," he continued, his eyes never leaving hers. He slowly lowered himself to one knee, and she gasped, her free hand flying to her mouth. He pulled the velvet box from his pocket, opening it to reveal the diamond that sparkled under the terrace lights. "You are my partner in every sense of the word. Will you build a life with me? Will you marry me?" Nneka looked from the stunning ring to his face, which was filled with so much love and hope it made her chest ache. The journey flashed before her eyes. The stern father, the dedicated teacher, the stolen kisses, the public scandal, the private triumphs. They had built something unshakable. Tears of joy streamed down her face as she nodded, her voice a choked but certain whisper. "Yes, Bayo, 1,000 times, yes." A shudder of pure, unadulterated joy went through him. His hands trembled slightly as he slipped the ring onto her finger. "Fit perfectly." He rose, pulling her into his arms and spinning her around as she laughed through her tears, the music swelling around them. He kissed her then, a kiss that tasted of promise and forever. When they finally parted, he kept her close, forehead resting against hers. "I love you, Mrs. Adeyemi-to-be," he whispered. "I love you," she whispered back, looking down at the ring that glittered on her hand, a symbol of a future she had never dared to dream of, but one that now felt as destined as the sunrise. The wedding of Chief Adebayo Adeyemi and Dr. Nneka Obi was the social event of the decade, a magnificent fusion of two worlds. The ceremony was held in a grand cathedral, its vaulted ceilings echoing with the soaring notes of a gospel choir. Nneka, a vision in a custom-designed ivory ofi lace gown that blended traditional Nigerian elegance with modern sophistication, walked down the aisle not to a classical march, but to a soulful rendition of Era by Brymo. On her arm was her father, Professor Obi, his chest puffed out with pride, his eyes glistening. Bayo, resplendent in a rich, cream-colored agbada embroidered with gold thread, felt his breath catch as he watched her approach. He saw not just the beautiful bride, but the fierce teacher who had challenged him, the passionate woman who had captured his heart, and the visionary partner who was building a legacy at his side. When she reached him, he took her hands, his thumbs stroking her knuckles in their familiar, cherished gesture. Kola, beaming with pride in a miniature version of his father's agbada, stood as his father's best man. His role was a testament to the journey that had brought them all here. As they exchanged vows they had written themselves, promising to be not just partners in life but co-conspirators in compassion. There wasn't a dry eye in the pews. The reception was a vibrant, joyful explosion of culture. Held under a massive marquee on the grounds of the Ikoyi mansion, it featured both a highlife band and a DJ. One moment, guests were swirling to the rhythmic beats of a talking drum, and the next, they were electrified by the latest Afrobeats hits. The air was thick with the aromas of lavish ISIU, jollof rice, and delicate canapes. Bayo watched it all from the head table, his arm around his wife. His wife. The word sent a thrill through him every time he thought it. He watched Neka's brothers teach his Lagos business partners the latest dance steps, and he saw his own Auntie Folake laughing heartily as Papa Obi demonstrated the proper way to eat a goat meat pepper soup. It was a perfect, joyous chaos. It was their family. As the evening sun dipped low, casting a golden glow over the celebration, Bayo stood up, tapping his glass gently. The crowd gradually quieted, all eyes turning to the billionaire and his new bride. He looked out at the faces of everyone they loved, from both of their worlds, now beautifully intertwined. Then he looked down at Neka, his eyes soft with a love so profound it felt like a physical force. A year ago, he began, his voice resonating easily in the quiet space. I stood in front of a different crowd of cameras. I was there to defend the woman I love from a world that was trying to diminish her. He squeezed Neka's hand. I told them then that she was my future. I had no idea how true that was. He paused, smiling. Neka, you walked into my life as a teacher. You saw the light in my son when I could not. You saw the man behind the title when I had forgotten he existed. You taught me that the greatest lessons aren't found in boardrooms, but in the human heart. You taught me about patience, about compassion, and about the kind of strength that is born from kindness, not power. Neka's eyes shone with unshed tears, a radiant smile on her face. They say I am a wealthy man, he continued, a hint of irony in his tone. And by the world's standards, I suppose I am. But I now know that the balance in my bank accounts is a hollow number. My real wealth. His voice broke slightly with emotion. My real wealth is sitting right here. It is my brilliant, happy son. He nodded at Kola, who grinned back. And it is the love and trust of the most extraordinary woman I have ever known. He turned fully to her, taking both of her hands in his. You are my greatest fortune, Neka. This family we have built, this foundation we are creating for children like our Kola. This is the empire that truly matters. This is the legacy I want to leave. He raised his glass, his gaze sweeping over the guests. So let's toast. Not to me and not even just to us. Let's toast to love, to family, and to the teachers who show us that the most valuable currency in the world is a heart fully loved. A chorus of amen and cheers erupted as glasses clinked. But Bayo wasn't finished. He pulled Neka to her feet and into his arms, dipping her in a kiss that was met with whistles and applause. As he righted her, laughing, the band struck up a slow, classic love song. He held her close, and they began to move together, their world shrinking to the space of their embrace. I meant every word, he murmured against her ear. I know, she whispered back, resting her head on his chest, right over his heart. You were my most challenging student, but you turned out to be my greatest success. He laughed, a deep, joyful sound that vibrated through her. And you, Dr. Obi Adeyemi, were the lesson of a lifetime. As they danced under the twinkling lights, surrounded by the roaring love of their chosen family, Chief Adebayo Adeyemi knew he had finally learned his most valuable lesson. He had spent a lifetime building a fortress of wealth, thinking it would protect him. But true security was not in the walls he built. It was in the love he let in. And as he held his wife, his teacher, his partner, his love, he knew his real empire was just beginning.